The bridge of the KRYLL flagship, Will of the Hive, was a cathedral of cold, silent efficiency. Light, a pale and sterile blue, pulsed from crystalline conduits embedded in the dark, chitinous walls. There were no shouts, no hurried movements. Only the soft, rhythmic clicking of the crew's mandibles and the almost subliminal hum of a starship operating at peak performance. From his command throne, a high-backed seat of polished bone and interwoven biocabling, High Lord VelkrYX observed the conquest of the human colony below. It was less a battle and more a meticulous, mathematical exercise done on the main holographic display. The planet Viridian swam in a sea of tactical data. Orbits were traced in cobalt light, shield strength percentages ticked down with predictable regularity, and vectors of energy weapon discharges were plotted with geometric perfection. Shield integrity of the primary colonial hub. VelkrYX asked, his voice a dry, rasping whisper that carried across the silent bridge without effort. His weapons master, a hulking KRYLL whose carapace was scarred from a dozen sanctioned pacifications, responded without turning. 63%, High Lord. Their ionic dispersal field is failing precisely as projected, and the fleet, maintaining standard defensive globe formation. No deviations. VelkrYX allowed a flicker of what, in a lesser species, might be called satisfaction. This was war as it should be. Clean, predictable, a science. The KRYLL hegemony had perfected it over 3 millennia. They would arrive, present their terms, and when those terms were inevitably rejected by a species clinging to irrational notions of sovereignty, they would systematically dismantle their defenses until the mathematical certainty of defeat became undeniable. Then, surrender would follow. It was the civilized way. Submind Kthara, VelkrYX called, his multifaceted eyes turning toward the data analysis pit, where a smaller, more slender KRYLL was absorbed in her work. Your final assessment of the target species' probable response. Kthara's head lifted, her own green-hued eyes betraying a flicker of something that was not part of the standard KRYLL emotional spectrum. Concern, perhaps. High Lord, their surrender should commence when shield integrity drops below the 40% threshold, as per standard galactic models of species capitulation. Should. VelkrYX's tone was sharp. There is no should in our calculations. Submind. There is only certainty. My apologies, High Lord, Kthara said, her antennae twitching slightly. The certainty is 98.7%. However, my analysis of the human historical data continues to present statistical deviations. VelkrYX shifted on his throne, an insectal rustle of impatience. We have been over this. Their pre-unification history is a chaotic mess of self-annihilation. It is precisely why they are deemed primitive and require our guidance. What more is there to analyze? Their doctrines, High Lord, Kthara insisted, her claws clicking rapidly across her console. Every other species in the known galaxy, upon reaching a certain technological level, transitions to doctrines of limited, strategic warfare. The humans, they never did. Their archives are filled with concepts we classify as total warfare. Even their entertainment, their games, their foundational myths. They glorify last stands, celebrate conflicts against impossible odds, and champion a principle of victory at any cost. It is a psychological profile that does not align with any species we have previously assimilated. It is the profile of a species that has not yet evolved past its own barbarism, VelkrYX stated, dismissing her concern with a wave of a four-jointed hand. They still use chemical rockets and kinetic projectiles, for the hive's sake. Primitive tools for a primitive mind. Their surrender is inevitable. Commander, the sensor officer's voice cut through the quiet hum. Their primary hub is broadcasting. A wideband transmission. A distress signal. VelkrYX's mandibles clicked in amusement. Asking for help. How typical. From whom could they possibly expect it? We control this entire sector. Commander. The officer's voice was suddenly sharp, losing its practiced calm. Long-range sensors detect an inbound vessel. A single vessel, moving at incredible velocity. It just exited subspace at the system's edge. VelkrYX leaned forward, his interest peaked. The holographic display shifted, a single, angry red icon appearing on the far side of the system map. Magnify. Identify its class. Unknown class, High Lord. The energy signature is massive, but the profile, it does not match any known human vessel in the mandates registry. It is large, far larger than their orbital defense platforms. Thara looked up from her console, her green eyes wide. High Lord, the vessel is broadcasting a simple, repeating identification code. UHM Leviathan. One ship, Velkryx mused, a low chuckle vibrating in his thorax. They send one ship against a fleet of 12 battlecruisers. Their barbarism is matched only by their foolishness. He turned his gaze back to the burning planet below. Ignore it. Continue the pacification. Let them watch as we finish our work. That will be the only message we need to send. The bridge of the UHM Leviathan was the antithesis of its KRYLL counterpart. There was no serene blue light, no polished bone, no silent grace. This was a place of brutal function, a cramped, armored heart nestled deep within a kilometer of steel. And composites, exposed conduits, thick as a man's arm, ran overhead, while the deck plates were scarred from the drills of 1,000 readiness exercises. The air hummed not with gentle energy, but with the raw, throbbing power of a contained star, and the only light came from the angry red glow of tactical displays and the stark white of targeting reticles. Marshal Valerius stood before the main command console, a monolith of a man in a simple, unadorned black uniform. He was old for a soldier, with lines etched around his eyes and gray dusting his temples, but those eyes were as hard and sharp as flint. He listened, motionless, as the last, desperate transmission from Viridian Colony played out across the bridge speakers. The voice of the colony's administrator, filled with a dignity that bordered on despair, echoed in the tense silence. If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Remember that we existed. Remember that we tried to be good. The message ended, replaced by the hiss of static. For a long moment, no one spoke. The junior officer at the communications station, a young woman fresh from the academy, visibly swallowed, her knuckles white where she gripped her console. They just stopped broadcasting, she whispered. The KRYLL have begun their final assault, Valerius stated, his voice a low gravel that cut through the tension. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the bridge crew. These were not diplomats or explorers. They were the inheritors of 10,000 years of human conflict, the professional edge of a species that had learned warfare in its own bloody cradle. Commander, he addressed his tactical officer, a woman with a face as grim as his own. Confirm KRYLL fleet disposition. 12 battlecruisers in a standard pacification globe around the planet. Marshal, they are launching troop transports. Minimal energy shields, no kinetic defenses detected. They believe they are conducting a simple mopping up operation. They are, Valerius said, his lips thinning into a faint, mirthless smile. Just not the one they think. He stepped onto the command dais, his boots ringing on the metal. His voice, when he spoke again, was not loud, but it filled the space, sharp and clear and utterly devoid of mercy. For 300 years, the Galactic Council has preached a doctrine of civilized war, a clean, sterile affair of energy shields and mathematical calculations. They attack from a safe distance, they disable, and they accept surrender. They believe this makes them advanced. It has only made them weak. He paused, letting his eyes meet those of each officer. They have forgotten what a real war is. They have forgotten that some acts do not merit negotiation. They have forgotten that when you threaten human lives, you are not engaging in a civilized exercise. You are signing your own death warrant. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the console's railing. The red light from the tactical display cast his face in demonic shadow. The KRYLL hegemony attacked a civilian colony without provocation. They are slaughtering families because they believe we are too primitive to stop them. They have followed their protocols. Now, they will learn ours. Valerius straightened up. Helm, bring us to point-blank engagement range. Tactical, do not waste energy on their shields. Target their reactor cores and command bridges directly. Communications, do not hail them. Do not acknowledge them. We are not here to talk. We are the consequence they have earned. A quiet, determined, Marshal, echoed from the crew. A grim understanding passed between them. This was not a rescue mission in the traditional sense. It was a punitive expedition. This was Protocol Omega. In action, even if they didn't call it by its name. This was humanity ceasing to pretend. Engage, Marshal Valerius commanded. The UHM Leviathan did not accelerate with the graceful surge of an alien vessel. It moved with the terrifying, silent inertia of an extinction-level event. A mountain of human rage and cold, calculated vengeance, aimed squarely at the heart of an empire that had never learned to fear the dark. Aboard the Will of the Hive, High Lord Velkyryx watched the lone human ship close the distance. Its direct, unwavering approach was an offense to every principle of civilized naval combat. It was the brutish charge of a cornered beast, not the elegant maneuvering of a sapient commander. He could almost feel the contemptuous clicks of his ancestors echoing in his mind. They are closing to point-blank range, High Lord, his weapons master reported, his tone a mixture of disbelief and professional disdain. They are well within the optimal firing envelope of our primary cannons. Of course, they are, Velkyryx rasped. They are primitives. They do not understand the science of spatial warfare. They believe, like all lesser species, that proximity equates to power. He made a sharp gesture with his upper appendage. Let us grant them the enlightenment they seek. All ships, fire at will. Overwhelm their systems. 12 KRYLL battlecruisers, paragons of hegemony design, obeyed as one. From their crystalline energy arrays, beams of pure, violet destruction converged on the UHM Leviathan. It was a perfect storm of energy, a focused tempest calculated to overload any shield generator known to the Galactic Council, to boil away armor and vaporize the crew within. It was a beautiful, terrifying display of power, the logical and inevitable application of superior science. The beam struck. And nothing happened. The energy did not dissipate against a shimmering shield. It did not reflect. It did not refract. It splashed. Like water against stone, the focused lances of annihilation broke against the Leviathan's dark, unyielding hull, washing over its grim, featureless surface in harmless, incandescent torrents. The human ship did not even shudder. It simply continued its relentless, silent advance. A wave of collective shock washed over the bridge of the Will of the Hive. The rhythmic clicking of the crew faltered, replaced by an unnerving silence. Report. Velkyryx screeched, his composure cracking for the first time in his long career. Why are their shields holding against a full fleet barrage? It was Submine Kthara who answered, her voice trembling as she stared at her sensor displays. High Lord, those are not energy shields. What? It is physical armor, she whispered, the words sounding like heresy on the pristine bridge. Thick, layered composites. Ablative plating. They are not deflecting the energy, High Lord. They are absorbing it. The heat is being shunted into massive internal sinks. Physical armor. The concept was so archaic, so inefficient. It was the method of savages who had not yet mastered the elegance of energy manipulation. It was a brute force solution to a nuanced problem, and it should have been useless against the focused power of a KRYLL fleet. Yet, the evidence was before them. The human ship was unscratched. Before Velkyryx could process this tactical impossibility, the situation became infinitely worse. Ports snapped open along the Leviathan's hull, but they did not glow with the familiar buildup of an energy weapon. They were dark, cavernous, and utterly inert. What are they doing? The weapons master stammered. Are those projectile tubes? Then the universe seemed to flicker. There was no beam, no torpedo launch, no visible projectile. There was only a subtle distortion in the space around the Leviathan, followed an instant later by the lead KRYLL battlecruiser, the Righteous Mandate, ceasing to exist. It did not explode in a glorious fireball. It did not break apart. One moment, the cruiser was a kilometer-long testament to KRYLL engineering, its violet running lights gleaming. The next, it was a rapidly expanding cloud of vaporized metal and superheated gas. A silent, instantaneous erasure. The perfect, globe-like formation of the KRYLL fleet was now marred by a gaping hole. On the bridge of the Will of the Hive, a shriek of pure, primal terror came from a junior sensor technician. No one reprimanded him. Every KRYLL present was fighting the same instinct. Their disciplined minds, trained for predictable, mathematical warfare, were short-circuiting. What was that? Velkrix whispered, his voice barely audible that Kthari's claws were frozen above her console. Kinetic strike, she managed to say, her voice hollow with horrified understanding. A solid projectile, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. Our shields were never designed to stop a physical object moving with that much energy. They simply passed through. She finally looked up from her screen, her green eyes wide with the terrible weight of her discovery. High Lord, the historical data, the total warfare doctrines. I did not understand. Their projectile weapons, the ones we dismissed as primitive, they never stopped developing them. While the rest of the galaxy was engaged in an arms race of energy versus shields, the humans were perfecting the art of throwing rocks. Another flicker. Another KRYL cruiser vanished, its passing marked only by a brief flash of light and the sudden absence on the tactical display. The mathematical certainty that had governed Velkrix's entire existence had been rendered meaningless. The clean, civilized science of war had just been bludgeoned to death by a species that fought with the brutal, simple logic of a hammer. He stared at the human ship, no longer a primitive curiosity, but a monstrous, incomprehensible predator. It hung in the void, a silent, armored behemoth, methodically picking off his ships one by one. The calculations, the strategies, the 3,000 years of KRYL military supremacy, all of it was useless. They had brought an elegant equation to a fistfight, and they were being brutally, efficiently, and uncivilizably torn apart. The game was over. The rules no longer applied. Fear, a primitive and illogical emotion he had not felt since he was a larva, coiled in his gut like a cold, venomous serpent. High Lord Velkrix struggled to regain control of his thoughts, to force the chaos of the moment back into the neat, predictable boxes of KRYL strategy. Two more of his cruisers had been erased by the humans' monstrous kinetic weapons, and the rest of his fleet was scattering, their perfect globe formation shattered into a panicked mob. His commanders were screaming for orders over the command net, but he had no orders to give. How could he command a response to a weapon that ignored their shields and a tactic that defied all logic? As if to answer his unspoken question, the Leviathan presented a new, even more profound absurdity. Hatches slid open along its armored flanks, but this time they did not reveal the dark maws of the kinetic cannons. Instead, dozens of small, coffin-shaped crafts were spat out into the void. They were crude, heavily armored pods, propelled by violent chemical thrusters that left angry trails of fire in the vacuum. What now? Velkrix demanded, his voice thin with strain. Are those fighters? Their design is pathetic. They lack any recognizable energy shielding. They are not fighters. High Lord, Submind Kthara reported, her own voice a tight whisper of dawning horror. Their trajectory is ballistic. They are aimed directly at our ships, specifically at the unwavering blade. A suicide attack? They would sacrifice their own pilots in such a futile gesture. Velkrix could not comprehend it. Target them. All-point defense cannons. Obliterate those pods. The remaining KRYL ships unleashed a torrent of defensive fire. A web of brilliant energy beams crisscrossed the space between the fleets, designed to intercept missiles and fighters with infallible precision. But the human pods did not fly like missiles. They tumbled and juked, their movements deliberately erratic, presenting unpredictable targets. A few were hit, vaporizing in silent flashes of light, but the vast majority plunged through the defensive screen, surviving on nothing more than speed and the sheer, idiotic bravery of their pilots. Inside the lead breacher pod, Captain Eva Rostova felt the impact of a near miss as a dull thud that vibrated through the deck plates. Strapped into her crash harness, she was an island of calm in the violent chaos. Around her, her team of 10 Marines, the first breachers of the mandate, were a study in coiled tension. Their black, non-reflective armor absorbed the dim red light of the pod's interior. Each soldier was a walking arsenal, their assault rifles magnetically clamped to their thighs, their utility belts laden with devices the KRYL would have deemed war crimes. 30 seconds to impact, the pod's pilot announced, his voice flat and professional over the internal comm. Check your seals and mag clamps, Rostova ordered, her own voice a low, steady alto. Torres, be ready with the cutter. We don't know how thick their hull is. Expect active resistance the moment we're through. Remember the doctrine: speed, violence, and surprise. We are the nightmare they never knew existed. Make them believe it." A chorus of "Ma'am," answered her. These were not conscripts. They were volunteers, every one of them, the best close-quarters combatants humanity had to offer. They were the inheritors of the brutal arts of the Viking, the legionary, and the commando. On the bridge of the unwavering blade, the KRYLL commander watched the human pods grow on his main screen, his mandibles clicking in confusion. "They are going to ram us?" he asked his tactical officer. What could they possibly hope to achieve? He received his answer a moment later when the first pod slammed into the side of his cruiser. It did not explode. Instead, a series of powerful, magnetic clamps fired from the pod, anchoring it to the hull with a screech of tortured metal that echoed through the entire ship. The KRYLL crew stumbled, thrown off balance by the unexpected impact. Before the commander could issue an order, a brilliant point of white-hot light appeared on the pod's tip. A plasma cutter, a crude tool used for mining and salvage, began to slice through the cruiser's hull with contemptuous ease. Alarms shrieked across the KRYLL bridge. "Hull breach imminent on Deck 7, an officer cried out. Security teams dispatched, but the KRYLL security teams were trained to repel boarders at designated airlocks, not to fight an enemy who simply cut their own door wherever they pleased. They arrived in the corridor just as the breached section of the hull exploded inwards in a shower of molten metal. Through the smoke and fire, Captain Rostova and her team entered the ship. They did not charge or scream. They moved with a fluid, terrifying purpose. Rostova raised her hand, and one of her Marines tossed a small, black orb into the corridor. It detonated not with an explosion, but with a blinding flash of light and a deafening sonic blast that sent the KRYLL security team reeling, their sensitive compound eyes overwhelmed, their auditory sensors fried. Before they could recover, the Marines were on them. They moved past the stunned aliens, their weapons firing short, controlled bursts. These were not energy beams, but hypersonic flechettes, tiny metal darts that shredded the KRLL's thin carapaces and the unarmored flesh beneath. The engagement was over in seconds. The KRYLL security team lay dead or dying, their civilized energy pistols still clutched in their appendages. "Corridor secure," Rostova sub-vocalized to her squad. "Torres, link to their ship's network. I want a full schematic. Everyone else, advance. Bridge is primary objective." As Rostova's team pushed deeper into the ship, similar scenes of brutal efficiency were playing out on two other KRYLL cruisers. The breacher pods had struck simultaneously, their teams deploying with a synergy that seemed impossible for a species the KRYLL had labeled as chaotic. The wide, elegant corridors of the KRYLL ships, designed for ease of movement, became death traps. The humans used the open spaces to create deadly fields of fire. They used tactics the KRYLL had no names for: leapfrogging advances, covering fire, the strategic use of smoke and explosives to shape the battlefield. The KRYLL crew, armed with long-range energy weapons useless in close quarters, were slaughtered on the bridge of the unwavering blade. The commander listened in horror to the reports flooding in from across his ship. Deck 7 lost. Engineering reports hostile contact. They're in the ventilation shafts. He saw them then, on a security feed from the main command corridor. A team of black-armored demons, moving with a predator's grace. They reached the bridge door. It was a meter of reinforced alloy, designed to withstand an internal explosion. One of the humans placed a shaped charge on the lock mechanism. The door vanished in a contained, violent blast. Captain Eva Rostova stepped onto the bridge, her rifle sweeping across the terrified KRYLL officers. Her face was hidden behind a polarized visor, making her seem like an impersonal angel of death. Behind her, her Marines fanned out, securing the room in a matter of seconds. Rostova walked to the paralyzed KRYLL commander, who could only stare at her, his mind unable to reconcile the being before him with the primitive data in his archives. She keyed her external comm, her voice broadcasting back to the Leviathan. "Marshal Valerius, this is Rostova. The unwavering blade is ours. Awaiting your orders." High Lord Velkyryx watched the tactical hologram with the vacant eyes of a being whose universe had been unmade. His fleet, the pride of the KRYLL hegemony, was not just defeated, it was being dissected. 3 of his finest battlecruisers were now silent, their command signals replaced with the stark, blocky encryption of the United Human Mandate. 5 more were crippled, venting atmosphere and drifting helplessly as the monstrous Leviathan continued its methodical destruction. The remaining ships were scattered, their perfect formation a forgotten dream. The humans were not just winning. They were humiliating him, proving that every cherished belief of KRYLL military science was a fragile lie. There was only one option left. It was a choice steeped in dishonor, an admission of absolute failure that would see him stripped of his rank and cast out from the hive. But it was the only way to preserve what was left of his fleet and the lives of his crews. Communications, he croaked, his voice a dry husk. Transmit the formal signal of hegemonic surrender on all. Council recognized frequencies. A tremor of shock went through the bridge crew. A formal surrender had not been issued by a KRYLL High Lord in over 500 standard years. It was the ultimate protocol, a sacred signal that, by the laws of every civilized species, ended all hostilities immediately. It was an admission that the calculus of war was complete, the outcome decided. The officer, his appendages trembling, activated the sequence. A complex, multi-layered signal, part energy pulse, part quantum waveform, blossomed from the will of the hive, a universal white flag that pulsed across the system. On the bridge of the Leviathan, the signal appeared on the main display as a serene, golden icon, a symbol of peace and de-escalation recognized by all. The human bridge crew visibly relaxed. The tension that had held them in its grip for the past hour began to ease. The fighting was over. They had won. Surrender signal confirmed, Marshal, the tactical officer reported, a note of relief in her voice. They're capitulating. Marshal. Valerius looked at the golden icon, his face an unreadable mask of granite. He did not move. He did not speak. The silence stretched, becoming heavier and more uncomfortable than the din of battle had been. Marshal? The officer prompted, confused. Your orders? Valerius turned his head slowly, his cold eyes sweeping over his crew. Did the Galactic Council's protocols stop the KRYLL from bombarding Viridian Colony? He asked, his voice quiet, but carrying an unnerving weight. The officer blinked. No, sir. But did the sanctity of civilian life prevent them from launching a ground invasion to enslave or exterminate 50,000 human beings? No, sir. Then their protocols do not apply, Valerius stated, turning back to the screen. And neither do ours. They started this war by breaking the most fundamental rule of all. We will finish it by teaching them that such actions have consequences that transcend civilized procedure. He pointed a single, steady finger at the display. Their surrender is rejected. Communications, broadcast this on an open channel to their entire fleet. You have forfeited your right to a civilized defeat. You will now receive a human one. A wave of stunned disbelief, colder than the KRYLL's fear, washed over the human crew. Reject a formal surrender? It was unthinkable. It violated every treaty the Mandate had ever signed. It was an act that would brand humanity as barbarians in the eyes of the galaxy. But one look at the Marshal's face told them the order was absolute. On the will of the hive, Valerius's message arrived like a physical blow. Velkyryx stumbled back from his throne. Rejected? They cannot. It is against all law. Their laws are not our laws. High Lord, Thara whispered, a new, deeper terror dawning in her eyes. I have been analyzing their preunification history, their concept of punitive war. Before Velkyryx could ask what she meant, a new sound flooded the KRYLL ship speakers. It was not the hum of engines or the crackle of weapons fire. It was a noise, chaotic and primal. It was the sound of 1,000 human voices screaming in unison, a raw, guttural roar of aggression that resonated with some ancient, buried predator instinct the KRYLL had evolved beyond millions of years ago. What is that horror? The weapons? Master shrieked, clamping his appendages over his auditory sensors. A war cry. High Lord, Thara analyzed, her voice trembling. From their ancient history. They call it the Haka. It was used to intimidate enemies before a battle. The screaming was then replaced by something else. A rhythmic, pounding beat accompanied by distorted electronic sounds and a single, powerful human voice singing. No. Shouting, words of defiance and rage. It was aggressive, discordant, and utterly terrifying. Military music, Kthara breathed. They are broadcasting their battle hymns into our minds. For the KRYLL, a species whose communication was based on precise, logical data streams, the raw, unfiltered emotion of the human music was a form of psychic assault. It bypassed their logic centers and spoke directly to their fear. On bridges across the KRYLL fleet, disciplined officers panicked. Soldiers abandoned their posts, their hive-mind coordination collapsing into individual terror. The very sound of humanity was a weapon more effective than any energy beam. The Leviathan began to move again, not with the urgency of battle, but with the slow, inexorable menace of a predator stalking wounded prey. Its kinetic cannons began firing again, methodically, one by one. Each shot erased another KRYLL ship that was trying to flee. It was no longer a battle. It was an execution. They are hunting us, a KRYLL commander shrieked over the fleet network. They are hunting us down like animals. VelKRYX watched, paralyzed, as his legacy was systematically dismantled. He had come to this system as a conqueror, a bringer of civilized order to a primitive world. He would be remembered, if at all, as the High Lord who had provoked the wrath of the galaxy's hidden monsters. He finally understood. Humanity had not evolved past warfare. They had perfected it, institutionalized it, turned every aspect of it, from technology to psychology, from sound to silence, into a tool of absolute victory. Their civilization was not built on the absence of war, but on its complete and total mastery. He looked at Kthara, whose own eyes were fixed on her data screen, a look of profound, scholarly terror on her face. They have a saying, she whispered, as if reciting a sacred and terrible text. A Latin phrase from their ancient Roman conquerors, si vis pacem, para bellum. What does it mean? VelKRYX asked, his voice a broken rasp. Kthara met his gaze, her green eyes reflecting the silent explosions of his dying fleet. It means, if you want peace, prepare for war. The silence that followed the KRYLL fleet's annihilation was heavier than the battle itself. On the bridge of the UHM Leviathan, the adrenaline of combat gave way to the grim reality of their situation. The red glow of the tactical lights reflected off faces slick with sweat, every crew member bound by a shared, bone-deep exhaustion. They were victorious, but they were also broken and utterly alone, adrift in a hostile sea of stars weeks away from the nearest human outpost. Damage report, Marshal Valerius ordered, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of failing systems. The words were a familiar ritual, but this time they carried an ominous weight. Commander Eva Rostova, having returned from her boarding action, now stood at the tactical console, her armor scarred but her posture unwavering. Severe damage across all lower decks, Marshal. The kinetic cannons took us to the brink. We have multiple hull breaches, and the primary armor belt on the port side is compromised. Life support is failing on decks 9 through 14. Chief Engineer Eris Thorne, a man whose face was permanently smudged with grease and whose hands moved with the certainty of a master craftsman, added his own bleak assessment from the engineering pit. The primary FTL drive is offline. Its power core is unstable after that last barrage. The secondary drive can get us home, but it'll take 6 weeks at a sustainable speed. We don't have the supplies for that, and we're a sitting duck for any other patrol that happens by. Valerius absorbed the reports without flinching. He looked at the holographic display. It showed the Leviathan, a wounded giant, surrounded by the drifting hulks of 3 captured KRYLL cruisers, the ones Rostova's teams had taken intact. For a moment, he was silent, his mind calculating, processing, adapting. We are not a sitting duck, Chief, Valerius stated finally. We are a fortress, and we have just acquired a quarry filled with stone. Thorne looked up, confused. Marshal, we captured 3 of their cruisers, Valerius explained, a dangerous glint in his eye. They are filled with advanced technology that our enemies believe is incompatible with our own. They are correct. It is incompatible. He paused. You will Make it compatible. Strip those ships for every useful component. I want their shield generators, their power conduits, their weapon emitters. I want you to integrate them into the Leviathan. We will rebuild our ship, here and now, using the bones of our enemies." A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Even Rostova stared at him in disbelief. "Marshal, with all due respect," Thorn began, choosing his words carefully, "that's impossible. Their technology is based on crystalline matrices and quantum state energy transfer. Ours is based on metallic circuitry and binary power systems. They don't speak the same language. The power requirements are different. The physical mounting points don't exist. It would take a decade in a specialized stardock to even attempt such a thing. You have 72 hours, Chief," Valerius replied, his tone leaving no room for debate. Humanity did not claw its way to the stars by accepting the word impossible. We survived by making things work with spit and wire and sheer, bloody-minded determination. Find a way. The order was insane, but it was also a spark in the dark. It was a human solution to an inhuman problem. When faced with a challenge you cannot overcome, you change the nature of the challenge itself. For the next 3 days, the UHM Leviathan became a frantic hive of desperate, brilliant improvisation. Engineering teams, augmented by Marines who knew their way around a cutting torch, swarmed the captured KRYLL vessels. They did not work with the elegant precision of KRYLL engineers. They worked with the focused chaos of a back-alley mechanic on a deadline. When the massive KRYLL shield emitters, twice the size of their human counterparts, wouldn't fit in the existing brackets, they didn't redesign the brackets. They cut massive, ugly holes in the Leviathan's armored hull and welded the alien devices directly onto the superstructure. When the crystalline power conduits refused to interface with the Leviathan's metallic wiring, Thorn's team didn't try to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics. They built what they crudely called a brute force converter, a monstrous, jury-rigged interface of magnetic coils and plasma injectors that took the elegant quantum energy of the KRYLL systems and violently forced it into a state the human ship could understand. The converter hummed with a sound that suggested it could explode at any moment. But it worked. Tech specialists worked without sleep, their faces illuminated by the glow of their datapads as they waged war on the KRYLL's operating systems. The alien computer architecture was non-binary, a complex and beautiful system of overlapping quantum states. The human programmers couldn't hope to understand it, so they didn't try. They wrote aggressive subroutines that acted like cages, grabbing the alien data, crushing its complexity, and forcing it into a crude but recognizable binary format. It was the technological equivalent of translating a sublime poem by shouting out the individual definitions of each word. It was ugly, inefficient, and an insult to computer science, but it allowed the two systems to communicate. Rostova's Marines, meanwhile, stripped the energy cannons from the KRYLL cruisers. They couldn't mount the entire systems, so they took the focusing lenses and emitter arrays and, with Thorn's guidance, grafted them onto the barrels of their own mass accelerator cannons. "What in God's name is that?" a Marine asked, staring at the monstrous hybrid weapon. It was a human kinetic cannon with the glowing, violet crystal of a KRYLL energy weapon crudely bolted to its tip. "That," Rostova said, a grim smile on her face, "is what happens when you corner a human engineer and tell them something is impossible." On the 71st hour, the final connection was made. Marshal Valerius stood on the bridge as Chief Thorn, looking more exhausted than any human had a right to be, gave the command to activate the new systems. "Powering the hybrid grid now, Marshal. Pray to whatever god you believe in." The Leviathan shuddered violently. Lights flickered. A low groan, like a beast in pain, echoed through the hall. Then, the groaning stabilized into a deep, powerful hum, a sound no human ship had ever made. On the tactical display, the ship's power levels surged, jumping to 300% of their original capacity. A shimmering, violet energy shield, a KRYLL shield, flickered into existence around the human warship's scarred, gray hull. "It's working," Commander Rostova breathed, her voice filled with awe. "The monstrosity is actually working." The UHM Leviathan was no longer just a human battleship. It was a hybrid, a bastard child of two warring philosophies, a testament to desperate ingenuity. It was a thing of ugly, brutal, and terrifying power. Their celebration was cut short. "Marshal!" the sensor officer shouted, his voice cracking with sudden alarm. Multiple subspace ruptures detected. Massive fleet signatures, converging on our position from 3 separate vectors. On the main screen, the space around them tore open. Dozens, then scores of ships dropped out of hyperspace. They were not KRYLL. These were different fleets, bearing the insignia of the hegemony, the Confederation, and the Alliance, the major powers of the Galactic Council. They had come to investigate the loss of the KRYLL fleet. They had come to assess the human threat. They had found 73 of the galaxy's finest warships, surrounding a single, damaged, human vessel. Valerius looked at the impossible odds arrayed against them, then at his own ship's status board, glowing with the stolen power of his enemies. "Well, Chief," the Marshal said, a cold, hard smile touching his lips for the first time. "It appears we're going to get to test your handiwork after all." 3 fleets, representing the collective military might of the Galactic Council's inner circle, formed a perfect sphere of containment around the lone human warship. 73 vessels, the graceful, blade-like cruisers of the Eridian Confederation, the massive, fortress-like battleships of the Sol Core Alliance, and the technologically supreme dreadnoughts of the Xylan hegemony, held their positions. With serene, arrogant confidence, their commanders, connected via a secure council command channel, conferred with the cold certainty of predators who had cornered their prey. "Its energy readings are erratic," broadcast the Eridian Fleetmaster, "and its hull shows significant structural damage. The KRYLL clearly wounded it before they were lost." "A single, crippled vessel," agreed the Sol Core Admiral, his voice a deep thrum of resonating bass. "Their desperation has made them foolish. This will be less a battle and more a culling." The Xylan High Commander, whose species communicated through shifting light patterns translated by machine, added, "The objective is clear. Neutralize the human threat. Analyze their anomalous technology. We will give them one opportunity to surrender, as per Council law." A unified hail went out from the Coalition flagship, human vessel Leviathan. The transmission began, the translator layering the 3 commanders' voices into a single, imperious demand. "You are outnumbered 73 to 1. You are damaged and surrounded. Power down your systems and surrender unconditionally. Your compliance will be noted, and your crew will be treated according to the protocols of civilized warfare." On the bridge of the Leviathan, Marshal Valerius listened to the demand, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He looked at the tactical display, at the overwhelming odds, at the perfect, predictable geometry of the enemy fleet. They were so sure of themselves, so wrapped in the dogma of their civilized rules. They had learned nothing. He activated the ship-wide broadcast. "All hands, you hear their offer," he said, his voice ringing with a calm, hard clarity. "They believe their numbers give them the right to dictate terms. They believe their laws will protect them. They have come to test us, to see if the fall of the KRYLL was a fluke." He paused. "Let us give them an answer." Valerius keyed the external communication channel. His reply was broadcast to every ship in the Coalition fleet. "This is Marshal Valerius of the United Human Mandate Warship Leviathan. You have come here to test human capabilities. Consider your test begun." The channel went dead. The 3 alien commanders exchanged pulses of confused light and energy. This was not the response of a cornered, wounded animal. This was the response of a hunter. "Their arrogance is astounding," the Sol Core Admiral rumbled. "So be it. All fleets, open fire. Erase them." A coordinated storm of destructive energy, orders of magnitude greater than what the KRYLL had unleashed, converged on the Leviathan. Beams of plasma, lances of coherent light, and waves of particle energy struck the human ship from every conceivable angle. It was a sun brought to bear on a single point, an attack so overwhelming that by all known laws of physics, the Leviathan should have been rendered into its constituent atoms. The hybrid shields flared to life. The violet energy of the KRYLL emitters, now powered by the raw, brute force output of a human reactor and controlled by the lightning-fast logic of a human battle AI, did not just hold. It thrived. The massive influx of energy from the enemy attack was absorbed, channeled through Thorn's monstrous converters, and shunted directly into the Leviathan's weapon capacitors. Shields at 78%, Commander Rostova reported, her voice tight with awe. Capacitors are overcharged, Marshal. We're at 150% weapon power. A predictable enemy is a generous enemy, Valerius said, his eyes fixed on the enemy fleet. They have given us a gift. Return it to them. The Leviathan answered the storm of energy with a storm of its own. Its hybrid cannons unleashed their terrible payloads. The mass accelerator slugs, now wrapped in crackling fields of captured KRYL energy, tore through the void. They didn't just pierce the advanced shields of the Council fleets, they shredded them. The energy fields on the projectiles reacted violently with the defensive shields, creating cascading failures that left the alien hulls momentarily naked and exposed. A fraction of a second later, the tungsten penetrators struck home an Eridian cruiser, a ship famed for its elegant design and speed, was hit amidships. The slug ripped through its slender frame, and the ship broke in half, its two sections spinning away into the dark. A hulking Soul Core battleship, a vessel designed to withstand planetary bombardment, took a direct hit to its command tower. The tower and the admiral within simply ceased to be. The coalition fleets faltered, their perfect coordination momentarily broken by sheer shock. Their most powerful weapons had been absorbed, and their most advanced shields had been rendered useless. While they struggled to recalculate, the Leviathan brought its second surprise to bear. The captured KRYL energy emitters, now guided by human targeting systems that valued speed and precision over elegant calculation, began to fire. They did not fire in massive, overwhelming barrages. They fired like scalpels. Fast, precise beams of violet energy lashed out, striking not at hulls, but at specific, vulnerable subsystems. A beam struck a Xylan dreadnought sensor array, blinding it. Another sliced through a Confederation ship's maneuvering thrusters, sending it into an uncontrolled spin. Then, Valerius gave his most insane order yet. Helm, bring us forward. Full thrust. Punch through the center of the Xylan formation. The Leviathan, its shields glowing with stolen power, plunged directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. It was a tactic of such suicidal recklessness that no alien commander could have anticipated it. They were trained to maintain distance, to trade fire according to calculated risk. The human ship was charging into a knife fight. Using its own armored body as a weapon, chaos erupted within the coalition fleet. The Xylan ships, trying to track the charging Leviathan, found their firing lanes blocked by their own allies. The Eridian cruisers, trying to maneuver for a better shot, collided with Soul Core battleships that were attempting to fall back. The perfect, geometric sphere devolved into a panicked fur ball of friendly fire incidents and near misses. From the bridge of his flagship, the Xylan High Commander watched in horror. They are using our numbers against us. They are using our own formations as a shield. From the heart of the chaos, the Leviathan continued its deadly work. It was now at point-blank range, a brawling, monstrous beast of a ship. Its secondary batteries, crude but effective projectile cannons, opened up, spitting shells of high-explosive ordnance that hammered against the unarmored sections of the alien ships. Then came the masterstroke. Captain Rostova's marine teams had been studying the captured KRYL technology. They had figured out how to operate the cruiser's short-range transport beam. Now they used it. A shimmering beam shot from the Leviathan and locked onto the bridge of the Eridian Fleetmaster's flagship. A split second later, a single, heavily armed human warhead materialized in the center of their command deck. The resulting explosion was small but devastatingly effective, decapitating the entire Eridian command structure in an instant. It was the final straw. The use of a transport beam as a weapon delivery system was so far outside the bounds of civilized warfare it bordered on blasphemy. Panic turned to a full-blown rout. The coalition, which had arrived as a unified force of judgment, broke and fled in every direction. The Leviathan did not give chase. It simply hung in the center of the debris field, its hybrid shields still glowing, its scarred hull a testament to the battle it had just won. Marshal Valerius watched the last of the Enemy ships vanish into subspace. He then opened a channel, broadcasting on a frequency that would reach the Galactic Council chambers itself. This is Marshal Valerius of the human warship Leviathan. Your test is concluded. You have your assessment. Our report will follow. The news of the Coalition's defeat arrived at the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime not as a report, but as a shockwave that shattered millennia of political certainty. The data logs, transmitted by the fleeing commanders, played on the main holographic display for all to see. A single human ship, a battered and monstrous hybrid, dismantling 3 of the Council's most powerful fleets with contemptuous ease. The arrogant pronouncements of the fleet commanders were replaced by a stunned, terrified silence. The old order had died in the space of an afternoon. Into this silence walked Ambassador Elias Thorne of the United Human Mandate. He was not announced. He was not escorted. He simply appeared at the entrance to the Great Hall, his simple black diplomatic robes a stark contrast to the glittering regalia of the assembled alien dignitaries. He walked to the center of the chamber, a space usually reserved for the High Council Triad, and the security forces, for the first time in their history, did nothing to stop him. Thorne was not a soldier like Valerius, but he possessed a different kind of human strength, the unwavering confidence of a man who knows he holds all the cards. Honored representatives of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice calm and clear, carrying across the vast chamber without technological aid. You have seen the report from the Xylan sector. You have witnessed the failure of your fleets. You are, I am sure, wondering what comes next. He let the question hang in the air, his gaze sweeping across the faces of beings who had, until yesterday, considered his species a primitive nuisance. Let me be clear, Thorne continued. Humanity does not seek to conquer your territories. We do not wish to dismantle your council or overthrow your governments. We have no desire for an empire. A wave of relief, palpable and profound, washed through the chamber. The Xylan High Commander pulsed a soft pattern of light. Then what? Are your terms? What tribute do you require? Thorne's expression hardened. Tribute? You mistake us. We are not the KRYLL. We do not seek payment for a war you initiated. Our terms are not for us, but for the galaxy you have so poorly managed. He raised a hand, and the holographic display behind him shifted, displaying a new document. It was titled the Mandate Doctrine. Effective immediately, the United Human Mandate declares protectorate status over any independent colony or non-aligned species that requests our aid. Any unprovoked attack against such a world will be considered a direct act of war against humanity itself. Murmurs of shock filled the hall. This was an unprecedented declaration, a unilateral claim to galactic authority. Furthermore, Thorne went on, his voice cutting through the noise, the age of civilized warfare is over. Your neat calculations and sterile protocols have been proven to be a dangerous fiction, a set of rules that protects the aggressor and punishes the victim. From this day forward, any species that initiates hostilities against a weaker power will not be met with a sanctioned pacification. They will be met with the kind of total war you have now witnessed. We will not disable your ships. We will destroy them. We will not accept your surrender until your will to make war is utterly and completely broken. We will make an example of you. He looked directly at the assembled representatives of the Eridian Confederation, the Soul Core Alliance, and the Xylan hegemony. They visibly recoiled. Humanity has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of conflict, Thorne said, his voice now a low, dangerous whisper. It is a terrible art, and one we had hoped to leave behind us. But you have reminded us that the galaxy is not yet civilized enough for peace. You have reminded us that predators still hunt in the dark. He straightened up, his tone shifting back to that of a diplomat. So we will accept this burden. We will be the guardians you have failed to be. We will patrol the trade lanes. We will answer the distress calls. We will be the ones who stand between the strong and the weak. In return, we ask for nothing but that you stay out of our way. The council was silent, broken. They understood. This was not a negotiation. It was a proclamation. Humanity was not asking for a seat at the table. They were flipping the table over and dictating the menu. In the months and years that followed, the galaxy was remade. Human warships, led by the now legendary Leviathan, became a common sight in the lawless Outer Rim. Pirate fleets that had plagued trade routes for centuries vanished, hunted to extinction by a foe that was more relentless and brutal than they were. Petty dictators and aggressive minor empires found their expansionist ambitions checked by the sudden and terrifyingly efficient arrival of a human battle group. And on worlds that had lived in constant fear, a new feeling began to take root. Hope. A colony of Zinthari miners, saved from slavers by a human cruiser, rebuilt their city. A race of gentle artisans, their world protected by a human-sponsored defensive grid, saw their culture flourish. Aboard his new flagship, the UHM Indomitable, Fleet Admiral Valerius stood watching a convoy of civilian ships from a dozen different species pass safely through a nebula that had once been a pirate stronghold. Commander Rostova stood beside him. "It's strange, isn't it?" she said quietly. "We built the deadliest fleet in the galaxy to defend ourselves. Now we spend most of our time acting as escorts for freighters. We built this fleet to ensure our survival, Captain." Valerius corrected her gently. "And we have learned that the best way to ensure our own survival is to ensure the survival of others. The strong must protect the weak. That is the only law that truly matters." He looked out at the stars, his mind going back to the desperate battles, the impossible odds, the cold calculus of war. Humanity had not changed. They were still the children of a death world, the inheritors of a legacy of violence. But they had found a new purpose for their terrible strength. They had come to the stars as explorers, been forced to become warriors, and had, by choice, become guardians. The galaxy was not yet peaceful, but it was safer, because the predators now knew there was a bigger monster lurking in the dark, and it was on their side.